what I realized is we have a lot to look forward to. We should expect to be happier. We should expect to be healthy. We should expect only good things from midlife on. Our physical trajectory isn't always what brings us that happiness. It's the other things in our life. It's our sort of psychic energy that we have out there, meaning that we are giving to others, that we're receiving from others. Most of us don't want things as big as we think. It's oftentimes the simpler things that make us really happy.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into the Vibrant Soul Society, The Conversations. Our mission here is to help you discover that you are greater than your negative thoughts. And beyond our negative thoughts is our true essence, our true self, that vibrant soul. Today, we are very honored and privileged to have a special guest with us, Debra. So, Debra, welcome to the Conversations.
I'm delighted to be here.
So, yeah, I'm excited to have you here. So, people that are unfamiliar with you, how would you describe Debra?
Well, I'm an applied developmental psychologist. I have been an aging specialist, somebody who looks at everything we don't want to have or get. And then I pivoted, and now I look at the positive things that we have to look forward to in midlife and beyond. And so my focus is on mentoring and giving back. And part of me is that I live this life. I also am a mentor and am the CEO and one of the founders of the Mentor Project. So, with a goal to get everyone mentored, connected, and living their best possible lives.
Interesting. So that's quite a bit of a pivot. So you went from this applied to development psychology to what you're doing now. What was that cause for that pivot?
It's still the same. Applied developmental psychology is still the same. But what happened was I was young and loved my grandmother so much. She was the most fun grandmother ever on the planet. And I used to go down to visit her in Florida all the time. And on one trip, I went down and visited her, and she wasn't the same. She was grouchy and irritable. And prior to that, every visit, she was the best dressed and most fun and exciting to be around. And she was completely different. And I said to someone at the independent living facility, "What's wrong with grandma?" And they said, "She's depressed. We'll fix her." And I was like, "What do you mean you'll fix her?" And they said, "Well, we will." She's taking a medication for her COPD, and it's making her depressed. It's a bad match medication. We'll fix it and she'll get better. Next time I came down there, she was fine. She was back to herself. I want to be a grandma fixer. So I went into the field of aging, thinking that aging meant everything bad that we had to look forward to, like depression and frailty and Alzheimer's disease and grief. And I went into that, and I did that for a long time. I ran a research institute in northern Manhattan and really thought I was doing what we're supposed to be doing, going out and putting a Band-Aid on some of the things that plague us in later life. And I went to a dinner party and somebody said, "What do we have to look forward to as we get older?" And I didn't have an answer for him. And that's when I said, uh-oh, I want to go back and look at everything and see what we have to look forward to, not all the things we can put a Band-Aid on, and realize there was a lot of research out there. There was a lot of work that had been done. It just wasn't making it to the media. So I pivoted, not changing anything other. I'm still an aging specialist, always will be, but everything I was studying was an outlier. It's not what we should expect, but it was what I had access to in thinking and knowing about aging. So what I realized is we have a lot to look forward to. We should expect to be happier. We should expect to be healthy. We should expect only good things from midlife on. And that was where I started to put my focus and look at midlife stages that are really the point where we absolutely explode in terms of our happiness and getting content with our life. And that involves giving back, which is one of those ways that we do that is through mentorship. So we're built to want to give back. We're built to want to be giving people and built to want to be connected with others. And that's really the storyline that we should be following instead of looking forward to a negative future.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there. I love the title Grandma Fixer. That's really good because you make an important point that we do put band-aids on everything without really addressing the root cause. Why do we get into this where is it because we want quick fixes? Why is it that we'll constantly, I see this as well, people putting band-aids on things instead of
Yeah.
addressing that root thing. What do you think that is?
Well, it really, if you really dial it back, whenever a person has a child, they don't say, hey, I want this long physical trajectory for my child. It's really an emotional thing. People say, I want my child to grow up to be healthy and happy, right? But along the way, what we end up having is an inverted V where we start to look forward to in our lives a physical trajectory. And that goes up, 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 right? Where you learn to walk, talk, run fast, do all those things, get eye-hand coordination. And then that starts to be a slow, steady decline. That's the picture we're presented. And that's scary because when you see a slow, steady decline, you think, uh-oh, I'm going to be losing my abilities. I'm going to feel worse. And that's scary. However, nobody talks about our emotional trajectory, which is what we want for ourselves and what we want for our children, which is to be happy, to be a fulfilled individual. And that is what we can expect to get, but it's not talked about. So at birth, right when we're, at the same point where we're looking for all of our physical trajectories to go up, our emotional trajectory goes up and it never goes down. So even while we have the decline, like I need reading glasses now, all of my students in their 20s can outrun me, but I'm happier. So that goes up. It doesn't coincide with physicality, which is what most of us think. So we think, uh-oh, I better put a Band-Aid on something that's scary because that'll put it off a little longer. In reality, if we can just look at the emotional trajectory, that's really what we want in the end anyway. But our physical trajectory isn't always what brings us that happiness. It's the other things in our life. It's our sort of psychic energy that we have out there, meaning that we are giving to others, that we're receiving from others. We're feeling like we have meaning in the world, that we are doing something important, that we're valued, those sorts of things.
Yeah, more stuff to dive in here. There's so much because you're talking about this physical trajectory. When I hit age 40, I was already in the decline. And my emotional state was also going in the decline as well. And it's interesting when you were talking earlier about that we should be expecting good things in life. But
Yeah.
when you're trapped into these health issues that a lot of people have, it, they don't expect good things. It just isn't part of their inventory. They don't know how to do that. So how do we begin to turn that around?
Well, sometimes it requires somebody else seeing something in you that you don't see for yourself. I needed that wake up call. It was an aha moment for me when somebody said, hey, what do we have to look forward to? I didn't see through that lens that there's anything good to look forward to. I saw a future of frailty, depression, and all of those things. Sometimes we need somebody. Maybe it's a mentor, it's a guide, or it's a coach, or it's a therapist, or somebody to be able to say, hey, what do you want out of life? And that's when you can say, ooh, let me put a different lens on and see something a little bit differently. I have a different outlook now. I expect that if you're in your 90s, you should not be sitting around depressed. You should not be focused on frailty. You should be focused on, what do I want my legacy to be? Do I feel good about my life? Do I feel like I'm connected with others? Those sorts of things.
Yeah, I really like that. That I really think like a mentor's job is really to get that belief in yourself that there's more for you out there, that they can perhaps see that you can't because you're locked into this emotional trajectory that isn't supportive, like depressed, this age, why should I enjoy life? And all these stories that we get into. And I saw that with my aunts as well. Once they got to a certain age, it was like they were not enjoying life. They were not happy. They weren't content. So it's really important this work that you're doing, that there's more to life if we can just let go of some of this stuff that's not supportive of us. So let's talk a little more about this mentorship and how you
Sure.
see mentorship.
So, I wrote about it in the book, The Mentorship Edge, and my real way of thinking of mentorship is different than the way that it's been presented. It got hijacked by corporate America. So people have all these definitions of mentorship that are out there. many of which are wrong. And also, it seems like something that is difficult to get because it's been put into a work arena. Like you get a mentor at work, when in reality, our biggest mentors are people, it's culture, it's values, it's traditions, it's the way we think. Religion has been passed down for centuries. It had, all of our values and all of those things are passed down for centuries. We do not, pass down and have like an accountant in mind when we're thinking of mentorship long term. But that's how it's presented right now. So if I were to say to you, here's what the definition of mentorship is, we really hit the peak of when we want to become a mentor. Mentoring is a mentor-focused thing. It's not a mentee focused, where you're out like reaching out, let me go find a nameless, faceless mentor who you don't really have a value associated with that person's expertise. It is the mentor who is feeling generative. That is a midlife, emotional, developmental life stage that we reach, just like walking and talking, where we are built to want to give back to others. We want to take whatever it is, all those boxes we spent checking off all of our life. We've accumulated expertise and values and culture, and we want to give it back. And the first step that we need is to be able to have somebody to give that back to who wants it. So if I said to you, hey, Baba Sam, I want to be able to give you, some kind of mentorship in a certain area, that you said, I'm not interested in that. That's not mentoring. We've already said, okay, not a mentor. So it has to be somebody willing to give and somebody willing to receive. It also has to be intrinsically motivated, not extrinsically motivated. And what I mean by that is that if you're paid, you're not a mentor. And that's because if I were to say to you, hey, would you like to go volunteer your time at a soup kitchen giving out food and beverage to hungry, thirsty people? You might say, yeah, and I feel really good about that. But if I said instead, hey, on your way there, turn left and go into Starbucks and just volunteer your time there, that's a whole different feeling. That has an extrinsic expectation to it that makes that volunteering experience not feel good, even if you're handing out food and beverage to people. So it needs those two things. It needs a meaningful connection. It needs trust. You have to trust your mentor. The mentor has to trust the mentee, and it has to have a goal. So all of this is what mentorship is. And it happens most frequently in our personal lives.
Yeah, some really good points there, that they're willing to receive. And yet you really do need that connection with the person to establish that trust so you can move in that direction that you want to move. So,
Right. It's like making a friend. So many people come by, you meet people. Are every one of those people somebody that you consider to be a friend? No. Does it make them less of a great human being? No, it's just not your person. And the same with mentorship. If you don't feel meaningfully connected, and every time we connect or meet, you're like, ugh, here we go. Or if you think I'm going to snatch your idea and run away with it as the mentor or the mentee, or that I'm going to undermine you in some way, that's not mentorship. It's some kind of connection, but it's not mentorship.
that's a really good way to frame it. We can really get ourselves into some difficult situations as well. If the goals aren't aligned, if the both person has a different thing they want in the outcome and they're not matched, that's also an issue.
Absolutely. So if we're aware of all of these things, it makes it easier to come in and say, oh, you know what? Everything's matching, but I don't trust this person. Okay, not a mentor. It's easy to then say, okay, I can connect with this person, but they're not going to be my mentor. It's like, saying you have a toxic best friend. That is not your friend. If somebody's throwing you under the bus, they're not your friend. So we have to think of mentorship in the same way, that this is a relationship or it's not.
Oh, that's a good way to reframe it. A relationship. Are you in a relationship with this person or not? Or is it just an acquaintance, somebody that you just happen to know?
Yes. And mentorship isn't that. It can be. There's like but really, like podcasting is a modern form of mentorship. Someone feels meaningfully connected to you and is watching you and listening to you and getting wisdom from you. They trust your advice. They feel great. It's a weaker but still form of mentorship. So we can get that in this modern kind of way, like you are with podcasting. But if we, and other formats as well, now that there's AI available and stuff like that. However, you have to feel that connection. If you are the mentee, like here you are as the mentor, the modern mentor, a person listening has to feel that connection to you in order for it to be taken
Mm.
as that.
You brought up something very interesting, AI. How do you see AI shaping this dynamic with mentorship? Because a lot of people are just going to AI now for answers and
Yeah.
solutions, as opposed to seeking someone out.
I don't see it as AI like going into ChatGPT, because like Google's not our mentor. And people use ChatGPT and the other formats for their, new Google. But it is used in some ways that makes relationships. So an example is one of the coaches, his name is Marshall Goldsmith. He decided to make an AI bot of himself that is free to everyone, where if you go in and you ask this bot, this Marshall bot questions, it will give you answers that would have come from him. He spent millions and all of his time crafting what his answers would be so it's accurate. And now it's been launched. And so a person who wants to go into coaching can get mentorship from him. That's an AI modern form of mentoring.
That's a really interesting way to how to use it in a positive way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's so there's a lot to digest here. How do you personally keep yourself on that emotional wave because life gets challenging at times?
Hey, we can all have bumps. We can fall off that pathway on occasion, and then we can get back on it. What we should know is that any bump is that you have, it's still probably going to right itself. But can there be outliers where somebody gets depressed? Yes. Can there be outliers where someone has a physical issue that brings them down emotionally? Yes, you can have those kinds of things. But our expectation is that that should always keep going up, even if you have a little dip here and there. Say you have like something, a crisis happens, something that happens in a year, or what happened to my grandmother, the blip, she took a medication that really made it so that she felt depressed for a short time. Then she got back onto her positive emotional trajectory. So we should really be looking at connections as the driving force for that, for making sure that we stay on that path, because it's our connections and the good ones that we make, like mentors, that help us to see, if you are talking to somebody who really cares about you, you're helping them to move in a direction that's positive for them. You don't say, hey, engage in this terrible thing. You say, hey, I see this strong point in you. Why don't you do more of that? Why don't you you know what? You never tried that, but you're so good at it. What's keeping you from that? Let's try to get through that and make that happen for you. We do that as friends. Mentors help to solve problems for people. Those are the connections that keep us on that nice, healthy emotional upswing for our whole lives.
All right, that's really important. Do you suggest, besides mentoring, do you do anything in the spiritual realms per se, like meditation or mindfulness? Is that part of this process as well?
It can be, but it doesn't have to be. I say, look, engage in absolutely everything. Why would you say no to anything? Like, get a coach, get a therapist, get spiritual, do whatever you want. Don't say, I've got one, I'm good. Really make sure that you're tapped in wherever you can at the level that you can, because, spirituality is a help also. So is meditation, so is therapy, so is having a coach, an advisor, a guide. Whatever you have, don't say, I'm good, I've got one. Say, let me branch out and get as connected as I can. And we should also not just be saying, I'm ready to receive all of this stuff. How are you giving? Like, where are you in this? Are you just taking? Make sure that you're giving as well, because that really makes you understand your importance.
Yeah, I love that comment that we're here to engage in life. A lot of us don't engage in life, especially with the pandemic. It really created a lot of isolation, and people are basically, a lot of fear states out there, where they don't engage in life.
Yes, that's true, because it's scary. There's a silver lining to the pandemic. People are much more connected than they ever have been. We have people who are receiving mentorship or friendship even, or connecting in ways that has never been. Zoom was not a big thing before the pandemic. If you wanted to meet with somebody, it was often in person. You didn't have the opportunity to meet with people globally and get connected with individuals everywhere. So there's a silver lining to that. And, with regard to the fear comment that you made, that there's a lot going on out there, Align with and meet with people who have your best interest in mind and with whom you have the best interest in mind. And then that becomes the forefront, not the other stuff that's scaring you.
That's a good way. Changing the focus, see
Yeah.
the good as we were talking about before, expect good things as opposed to the opposite side.
Yes.
So how do you find a mentor?
So, mentors are everywhere. Most people, everyone I know is a mentor, and it's really as simple as looking left or looking right. When we start to think of mentorship, it's how religion is passed down. It's how spirituality is discussed and continued with people. So it didn't come out of a box one day. A person didn't say, "Hey, this is going to be the religion," and then the next person in the family says, "Hey, I've got a new one." It gets passed on. That's mentorship. In terms of any entrepreneurial expedition that anybody's been on, you do not have anybody hierarchical that you're looking at. You have to do it on your own. If you're a software engineer, you're talking to a hardware engineer. Those are all mentors. Most people haven't labeled it as that. They label it as, oh, somebody who helped me. But when you don't make it a connection that matters to you, that's meaningful to you, you don't realize how connected you are and you don't get to feel the benefit of that relationship. So all you need to do if you want a mentor is to look to your left and look to your right and say, who's this sitting next to me? Is this somebody I should be helping? Or is this somebody who might be able to help me in something? Doesn't have to be big and global. It could be small, something that you're trying to solve a problem with. But look at every connection as a potential for mentoring.
That's a good way to look at it. You're just asking a simple question. I have this particular issue. Who can help me resolve it?
Yes. And you would be surprised. The network that we have been developing by the time we hit midlife is really rich. And we often think that those who are the closest to us are the least likely to mentor us. And that's really incorrect. The power of grandmas is unbelievable because they're the ones who often are passing down the family traditions, the values, the rich culture that each family holds. And so we should be looking at those who are our friends, our family, and then widening that. Join a network group, get out there and get connected, join something in social media, or go and get involved in some kind of if you're at work, some kind of a Slack channel or a group there that you can meet somebody informally so it doesn't feel awkward. Because nobody wants it to walk up to somebody and say, hey, be my mentor. What we can do easily, though, is say, hey, can I pick your brain? Can you give me some advice about this? And then it can develop organically.
Well, it just brought up an interesting idea with me. You mentioned grandma. It could be the aunts, the uncles that are older than you that have this
Yeah.
experience. But I never asked any of them, how did you do this? Why don't we go to them and ask them questions? Or like, I never even thought of that.
You can figure out way more things than you'd ever imagine. But imagine how that person who's mentoring you, how relevant they feel, how they feel like they matter, how their footprint in the world is now one that got a little bit deeper. And that's something that's super important to us.
Yeah, because I never thought of that when my aunts and uncles were around that were accomplished. I never thought to pick their brains. It's really an interesting concept. It was a little bit of an aha moment for me. So maybe for the audience that is listening, maybe they're a little bit younger than us, can say, hey, I'm in my 20s. I'm trying to figure out college life. I see my Uncle John over here is extremely
Yeah.
successful. Let me go pick his brain and see what
Yeah.
his advice is for me. Why is that?
We take for granted that which is around us most often, right? And that's just how we are. But we don't have to live like that. And why should we be blind to the everything that is around us, including our friends? Why are you friends with them? Because there's something you like about them. So tap into these individuals. It makes your relationship more meaningful. If you're taking people for granted who are in your home, you're normal. We all do that. But you don't have to. You can go a little deeper. And that's really, it's just as easy as saying, tell me about this. Or I could use some guidance in this. You don't have to take it, but asking might lead you to taking some new path or adding to what you already have.
Just to look around you, like who's around you that can help. And I think there's just some fear in there as well as asking somebody that you know, because it might be a difficult issue with them. I have plenty of
Yeah.
cousins with health issues, but they never once come to me with a question. They've seen my turnaround, but they have never come to me.
That's, we all feel vulnerable. Is somebody going to judge me if I come to them? And
Mm,
that's the trust part of mentorship. That's what, if you do not have that trust component, it's not mentorship. But can you get around that and get trust? You could say, hey, if you are interested, I know that you aren't feeling well. I'd love to tell you a little bit about my journey. And they may say no. Okay, you're not a mentor. Big deal. If they say yes, maybe you can mentor them. We can be proactive as mentors and say, I see that you need help in this. And that could be, you're a hardware engineer and I have the software engineering that I can add to what you're doing to make it so it'll work for you. Or it can be an emotional thing that you're saying, hey, I know that you're on this emotional journey. I may have something I can add, take it or leave it. And that opens the door to a more meaningful connection with that person.
no, I want to be a mentor to my cousin. I was just say, hey, I see you're constantly posting about this issue. You want to hear about maybe some suggestions that could?
Hey, is there something that anything that you'd like help with? Is there any way I can be helpful?
Is there any way I can be helpful? That way there's no threat there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good advice that we have skills. And it's true. We're older than some of my cousins that are second or third cousins. And we've been there. But once again, it's the younger reaching up to the older, but the older need to reach down to the younger as well.
There should be no thought of direction because if you look at, say, for example, ad campaigns, if you're trying to put out a message to younger people, it should not be, boomers and Gen X coming up with that. We need to get the mentorship from the person who's like millennial or Gen Z to be able to say, what do you tell us what this, group is thinking about this particular thing. We really need to say to ourselves that we need to take everybody's ideas into consideration. So mentorship is not always hierarchical. It's often lateral in many ways. It can even be, people call it reverse mentoring, but that's still hierarchical. We can still just look at it, whether it's younger going up or down in any way.
Just a matter of like who's around that can help, like looking right or left. It shouldn't be right the hierarchy. It should just be looking around regardless of getting on these mental levels because they really don't exist.
No, it really should look like a spider web, a lot of connections that go in every direction and your connections are making connections. It really makes it much so that you can see that you have a much richer life. And I'll give you an example of what somebody did. Bob Lefkowitz is the 2012 Nobel laureate in chemistry. And he was like, how did I become a Nobel laureate? How did that happen? I wonder how. So he made what he calls a legacy tree. And that is where he put his mentors above him and his mentee, the few mentees that he knew of below him and all the people lateral to him that were involved in anything that he's ever done. And so it looked like an ancestry.com kind of family tree, but it was with mentorship. And he published that in a peer-reviewed journal and then went to a conference a couple weeks later. And when he went, somebody came up to him and he said, hey, Bob, I'm 6 degrees Lefkowitz. And Bob said, what do you mean? And he said, well, there are 5 people that have worked between you and me. I saw your article that came out and I am 6 degrees away. And so Bob said, well, what are you working on? And he told him and he said, oh my gosh, he heard his own voice, his own words, and he could see the work that he had done and how far out it had made it. And it wasn't done with this guy. It's still going. And so most of us don't understand or see how that looks because we don't follow up. We don't say, oh, let me go talk to somebody and see what they did with that information. But if you were to make your own legacy tree, you would see that everybody around you plays a part in your life in some way, and you play a part in theirs. And it's really pretty remarkable.
Yeah. So when you're talking about this legacy tree, it's really like a spider web that we not be
Yeah.
aware that our work is impacting people. So you
Yeah.
hear, oh, I didn't even really know this person. They're kind of far from me, but yeah, I'm having this impact. That must be very inspiring for that person as well.
And it's something we can all do. We can all make our own legacy tree to see, because there is power in terms of our own emotional state, knowing that we make an impact in the world and knowing how far reaching it goes. We all are making an impact every single day. Sort of put one foot in front of the other and move forward without acknowledging any of that. And that's really the part that makes our emotional trajectory continue to go up, is when we know and can feel that we have made a difference.
Right. And I can see when you're on that emotional trajectory, when you're in midlife, you can say, okay, we can we can do more. We can
Yeah.
expand this out, really help grow. So there's really a lot of power and mentorship in the way that you're framing it. Not the way I thought it before was somebody that's older, wiser, that's helping me do this. No, it's really like, as you said earlier, just looking left and right. I have
Yeah.
this little issue. Who knows something about this?
Yeah. And everybody, it makes you feel more curious when you meet somebody. You then aren't thinking, it adds a level where you're thinking, well, what do they know? Because you can learn something from everybody. There's that old saying. But now, when you really think of it differently, you can say, you know what? This person might know something, and it might not be right then and there. An example is LaTanya Kilpatrick. She's the vice president of research at Colgate-Palmolive in New Jersey. And she went to a conference and was sitting next to somebody who did work in dog food. And she looks at oral health in humans. And her entire group was tasked with this huge problem to solve about oral health. And she was stumped. A long time later, she said, I remember meeting this woman who works in the dog food division of company. She called the person, oh yeah, we're working on like gut biomes in animals. And LaTanya said, do you think there's any way that that might transfer to humans? And it turned out that they made a breakthrough in human oral health because of this connection that she made a long time ago that seemed so irrelevant. Like, what would this person ever have to offer to me? That person became a lateral mentor to LaTanya, which changed her work world. If we disregard everyone we meet as not relevant to us in some way because they're not relevant at that moment, we lose out on potential future lateral mentoring.
I love that word too. You talked earlier about being more curious. I think curiosity is a thing that leads us to change.
Absolutely.
Diving down and asking questions, because when I was my own story, I was stuck, doctors, medicine, diagnosis. I was stuck in this loop, but I was never curious enough to look outside that world and say, hey, there's somebody over there. They got this horrible
Yeah.
diagnosis and it's not defining them. So it's really interesting if people would be more curious. And I think that really adds even more to the power of mentorship, that you can find mentors when you are more curious.
Yeah. And you can be a mentor when you least expect it. It's like we have a little hero cape that's tucked into the back of our shirt. And at any moment, that cape can come out because we can help somebody who we say, oh, you have this going on. Hey, I have some suggestions for you. Are you open to it? These little things can lead to really offering support. And if we are open to hearing someone say, boy, I'm having this issue, and instead of tuning it out and saying, too bad for you, and we say, gee, is there a way I can help? That's an opportunity for us to whip out our little cape and become a mentor.
I love that Cape superhero. It just reminded me of another story that when I was publishing my first book and I was talking to one of these agents, he's like, yeah, everyone has a secret in this room that no one knows anything about.
Mhm. Mhm.
They're not asking questions.
Yeah. Yes, that's true. We can't know anything if we don't ask a question. And that is the key for both mentors and mentees, because we need to help those that we're mentoring. We need to ask questions, and mentees need to ask questions of the mentor. It's really an important thing. And again, that mentor could be somebody that is next to you, above you, below you in terms of hierarchy or age. And so we should really, question and connection is really the core of that.
Right. Just saying who's around. asking people questions, and they might not be the right person, but you don't know until you ask that question.
Yeah,
But all,
exactly.
it all starts with the question and being curious, and
Yeah.
then perhaps be willing to hear the answer as well.
Yeah. You have to trust, that if you feel like you're tuned out and you can't hear it, it could be because you don't trust yourself or you don't trust that other person. But you need to have that. You need to be able to face the vulnerability that you're feeling.
Yeah, that's another thing. Trusting yourself, being vulnerable. They've been
No.
taught constantly by society that they don't know what's best for them.
Yeah. And you know what? We can take control of that. We have the ability to do that. And it feels good to feel in control. It feels good to feel connected. It feels good to know that when you're talking to somebody, they care about you and they're giving you information you need or that you want, that it could be a culture or a value. And when you have that, it is a feeling of like a nice deep exhale because you feel that you are comfortable. You feel that you are safe.
Yeah, very good point. Because everyone wants to be in control, but some of us don't. Because I remember when I had my 7 doctors, it was always their job to fix me. It was always my job, though. I wasn't in control, but once I did take control, my whole life changed. But so how do we make that pivot of standing back into our power?
There are lots of ways. One is to say, hey, we have to see our own power. And sometimes it's hard to see that. And I'm going to give you an example. There was a guy with COPD. He was in a wheelchair, had oxygen all the time. And I was like, why are you happy? How can that possibly be? And he said, I have everything I truly want. I can see my grandchildren. I can read. I can go on the computer. I get joy every single day.
Mm,
And it was because he took that power that he did have. He couldn't control his body in the way that he used to, but he can control everything else that brought him pleasure. So he was like, I don't need to walk around like I used to. I can still get what I need. People come to me, or I can get help to go out, these sorts of things. So it's realizing, what do you really want? Are you just throwing away your power every day because you're not acknowledging anything that you hold relevant and valuable to yourself? And you're just moving along? That's not holding your power. That's just skating through life. So find out what really matters to you, and then you'll be able to find how you can hold your power.
That's an important question for people to consider. What do you really want? Then who's around you that can help you move in that direction?
Most of us don't want things as big as we think. It's oftentimes the simpler things that make us really happy. Think of the moments that you laugh and giggle endlessly with somebody that you care about, or being able to see people that you care about and having those conversations. Those matter. When I was working in the end of life with people, nobody cared about the sort of material things that people get caught up in. That if you say, hey, I bought a new pair of shoes, you feel really happy for a few minutes. And then that goes away, then you want another new pair of shoes or whatever that is. If that isn't part of what you really want or makes you have to find out what would give me that long-term happiness. Is it that I want to feel relevant? Is that I want to feel like I matter to people? Is it that I want to feel like I'm useful, that I'm helpful, that, something like that. Then once you identify that, you can tap into that and get that.
Yeah, usually it's just the simple things in life that we want, to be happier, to have less pain, to enjoy life.
Yes, it is that. And a lot of people think, well, my importance will be by what somebody can see. I'm carrying something, or I wear something, or I have something, but that becomes a lack, in very quickly. So if we can find what it is that makes us feel what we would have been getting from that physical thing in an emotional state, then we're in good shape.
So many good points in this whole interview today. So many golden nuggets here you shared with us today, Deborah. So if people had any questions, how would they reach out to you?
I have a website, deborahheiser.com. I'm on LinkedIn. You can go to mentorproject.org, and you can also check out my book. It's everywhere you get books in every format. If you like to listen, If you like Kindle, if you like hard copy, it's available in all those ways, but you can reach me in any of those ways.
Thank you again for joining us on the conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Me too. I really enjoyed speaking with you. Thank you for having me.